The phone rang. It was after 1 in the morning. Most late-night calls bring bad news. This one brought something worse. Because the voice on the other end didn't ask for Jason Chen. He already knew it was him. And in Neon City, when someone knows your name before you say a word, it usually means the trouble's already started. The phone rang at 1:12 a.m. Most people hated calls that late. Jason Chen didn't. Late-night calls usually meant one of two things. Someone needed help, or something interesting was happening. Either way, it beat sleeping. Jason leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on the green text scrolling across the CRT monitor in front of him. A Pac-Bell diagnostic program was running on one screen, while a second monitor displayed switching data from a test trunk he'd been tinkering with earlier that night. His apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of electronics. Jason liked it that way. From the outside, the building looked like it should have been condemned years ago. Old brick, cracked windows, faded signage from businesses long gone. But inside Jason's apartment, everything was clean, organized, and purposeful. The far wall held a long desk covered in equipment, CRT monitors, patch panels, an oscilloscope, 2 modems, Pac-Bell test equipment he probably wasn't supposed to have at home. Most of it had been acquired through a mix of legitimate surplus purchases and favors. Below his window, the faint glow of the Korean restaurant's neon sign flickered against the wall. Jason reached for the phone as it rang again, but then he paused. There was a click, subtle, barely noticeable, but Jason heard it. He always did. He slowly lowered his hand from the receiver and instead reached toward the equipment beside him. He flipped a small toggle switch. A small red LED lit up. Trace equipment activated. Jason let the phone ring once more before picking it up. Chen. There was a slight delay, then a voice. Male. Calm. Controlled. Jason Chen? Jason didn't answer immediately. His eyes shifted to the trace display. Signal active. Good. Depends who's asking. Another short pause. You helped Layton recently. Jason's fingers moved across the keyboard, initiating the trace sequence. The equipment emitted a faint tone. Line capture engaged. Maybe, Jason replied calmly. You should tell him he's looking at the wrong people. Jason leaned forward slightly. That's not usually how this works. The trace meter ticked slowly upward. These things took time. In the 80s, tracing a call wasn't instant. The caller had to stay on the line long enough for the switching equipment to identify routing paths. Jason had built his own setup to speed the process, but physics and infrastructure still had their limits. You should pass the message along, the voice said. Jason typed another command. Partial routing beginning. Who is this? Jason asked. Silence. Jason watched the meter, still connected. Good. You don't need to know, the voice finally said. Jason leaned back slightly, keeping his tone neutral. You're calling me in the middle of the night to warn a private investigator? And you don't think I need to know who you are? Another pause. The trace meter climbed, slow, but moving. Tell Layton, the voice continued, to stop digging into the yacht. Jason's eyes narrowed slightly. So this was about the missing yacht case. Interesting. Or what? Jason asked. The line stayed quiet for several seconds. Jason watched the trace meter creep closer to completion. Almost there. Then the voice returned. Or next time, the yacht doesn't come back. Jason didn't react outwardly. Inside, though, that got his attention. That wasn't a warning. That was a threat. Jason typed another command, forcing the trace deeper into the routing path. Almost. Click. The line went dead. Jason stared at the display. Trace incomplete, but not empty. He leaned forward quickly, scanning the captured data. Partial routing information, switching node ID, trunk identifier, exchange code. Jason's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. He cross-referenced the switching data. The result appeared a moment later. Jason frowned slightly. Downtown exchange, commercial routing. After hours. That was unusual. Most office buildings didn't route outgoing calls through commercial trunks that late unless someone had direct access to switching equipment or specialized lines. Jason leaned back slowly, thinking. Someone had called him. Someone who knew Michael, someone who knew about the yacht case, and someone who had access to telecom infrastructure. Jason looked at the blinking cursor on his screen. Then he reached for a notepad and wrote down the routing information. He tore the page off and set it beside the keyboard. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Jason stood and grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. If someone wanted to play games through the phone system, Jason intended to find out who. Before they called again. Jason grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, pausing briefly to shut down part of his equipment. The trace data remained on one monitor, green text glowing quietly in the dark apartment. Downtown exchange, commercial routing, after hours. Someone with access had made that call, and Jason intended to find out who. He stepped out into the hallway and moved down the worn stairwell. The building smelled faintly of old wood and cooking oil from the restaurant below. As he reached the ground floor, the warm glow of fluorescent lights spilled from the Korean restaurant. The late-night crowd was small. 2 regulars sat at the counter quietly eating. The owner glanced up as Jason passed. Jason gave a small nod but didn't stop. Tonight wasn't about noodles. Outside, Neon City had settled into its late-night rhythm. Streetlights reflected off damp pavement, and a faint ocean breeze moved through the palms lining the street. Jason slid into his white Audi Sport Quattro and started the engine. A few minutes later, he pulled into downtown. The exchange building sat quietly between 2 larger office towers. Nothing flashy, just another mid-rise structure with minimal signage. But Jason knew Pac Bell leased switching space inside. He parked half a block away and stepped out. The building entrance was locked. Not surprising. Jason walked around the side, scanning for exterior access points. Telecom buildings almost always had service panels for diagnostics and maintenance. He found one near the alley, a metal junction cabinet mounted low against the wall. Jason knelt and opened it. Inside, bundled cables and diagnostic ports. He pulled a small handheld tester from his jacket and connected the leads. The device hummed softly. Jason watched the readings. Active line. Recently used. He checked the routing identifier again. Same trunk, same node. Whoever made the call had accessed this line not long ago. Jason closed the panel slowly. Then he heard footsteps. He turned. A man stood near the far end of the alley, partially in shadow. Mid-40s, plain jacket, hands in his pockets. Watching him. Jason straightened casually. "Building's closed," the man said. Jason shrugged. "Just checking a line." The man studied him for a moment. "You maintenance?" Jason gave a small, non-committal nod. "Something like that." The man didn't move, just stood there. Jason closed the cabinet and stepped away, walking calmly back toward the street. He kept his pace steady, resisting the urge to look back. When he reached his Audi, he got in and started the engine. As he pulled away, he glanced in the mirror. The man was still standing in the alley, still watching. Jason frowned slightly. That wasn't normal. Someone was guarding access to that line, which meant the call hadn't just been a warning. It had been planned. Jason turned the wheel, heading back toward his apartment. He needed to think, and decide whether this was something to bring Michael into now or after he learned more. Across town, Michael Layton sat at the bar inside his beach house, flipping through notes from the yacht case. The quiet sound of waves drifted in from outside. Something about the case still bothered him. He reached for the phone and dialed Jason. The line rang. No answer. Michael tried again. Still nothing. He leaned back slightly. Jason usually answered late calls. If he wasn't picking up, he was either working or already chasing something. Michael grabbed his keys. A few minutes later, the black Lamborghini Countach rolled to a stop outside Jason's apartment building. The old brick structure looked worn under the streetlights. The neon from the Korean restaurant below flickered faintly across the sidewalk. Michael stepped out and glanced up. Jason's lights were on, but the Audi wasn't parked outside. Michael frowned. He headed for the restaurant door. The bell chimed as he entered. The owner looked up and nodded. "You Jason, friend?" Michael smiled slightly. "Yeah." "He left. Maybe 30 minutes?" Michael nodded. That tracked. Jason was already working something. Michael turned toward the door, the quiet unease settling in. Whatever Jason had found, it was enough to pull him out in the middle of the night. And that usually meant trouble. Jason pulled back onto his street and immediately noticed something new. The lights in his apartment were still on, but that wasn't what caught his attention. It was the car. A dark sedan sat parked half a block down, engine off, no interior lights, just sitting there. Jason drove past without slowing. He circled the block once, then came back around. Still there. Jason parked normally along the curb and stepped out, locking the Audi. He kept his movement casual, but his eyes tracked the sedan as he walked toward his building. No movement inside. Could be nothing. Could be everything. Jason entered the building and headed upstairs. Once inside his apartment, he didn't turn on any additional lights. The glow from the monitors illuminated the room just enough. He moved straight to the desk and checked the trace data again. Switching node, commercial trunk, downtown exchange. Jason began cross-referencing the routing path using his Pac-Bell diagnostic tools. Lines of green text scrolled across the monitor as he accessed internal routing tables. A few seconds later, something appeared. Restricted access line. Jason leaned forward. That wasn't standard commercial routing. Restricted lines were typically assigned to specific clients, private networks, corporate systems, sometimes government contracts. Jason typed another command. Access denied. Jason smirked slightly. All right. He reached over and patched a second line into the system, routing through a maintenance diagnostic channel. The screen flickered briefly, then more data appeared. Jason scanned the results. The restricted trunk connected to a private switch. Location, Ewing Business Center. Jason frowned slightly. That was interesting. Michael's office building. Jason leaned back slowly. That either meant coincidence or someone very close to Michael. Jason reached for the phone and dialed Michael's beach house. No answer. Jason checked his watch. Michael was probably already out. Jason grabbed a notepad and wrote down the trunk information. Then he shut down the trace equipment and stood. If someone was routing calls through the same building as Michael's office, this just got more personal. Outside, Michael stepped back onto the sidewalk after leaving the restaurant. The quiet street stretched in both directions, the neon glow reflecting off parked cars. Michael paused. He noticed the dark sedan half a block down, the same one Jason had seen earlier. Michael's instincts kicked in immediately. The car didn't belong. He walked toward his Countach, pretending not to notice, but kept the sedan in his peripheral vision. Still, no movement. Michael got into the Lamborghini and started the engine. As he pulled away, he checked his mirror. The sedan stayed put. Michael drove 2 blocks, then slowed. A moment later, headlights appeared behind him. The sedan. Michael allowed himself a small, knowing smile. All right. He turned onto a wider boulevard. The sedan followed. Michael pressed the accelerator slightly. The Countach responded instantly, the engine growling as he picked up speed. The sedan stayed with him, not aggressive, but deliberate. Michael turned again, this time toward the coastal road. Less traffic, more room. The sedan followed again. Now there was no doubt. Michael pressed harder on the accelerator. The Countach surged forward, engine echoing off nearby buildings. The sedan tried to keep pace. Michael took a sharp turn down a side street, then another. The sedan followed the first turn, but missed the second. Michael eased off the throttle and glanced in the mirror. Empty road behind him. Michael exhaled slightly. Someone was watching, which meant Jason probably wasn't the only one being monitored tonight. Michael turned the wheel, heading toward Jason's apartment. Time to compare notes. Back at Jason's apartment, he grabbed his jacket again. He stepped out into the hallway just as footsteps approached from the stairs. Jason looked up. Michael appeared at the top of the stairwell. They both stopped. Jason gave a small nod. "You get a call?" Michael raised an eyebrow. "You too?" Jason gestured toward the apartment. "You're going to want to see this." Michael followed him inside. Jason handed in the notepad with the routing information. Michael scanned it. "Ewing Business Center?" Jason nodded. "Restricted trunk line. Someone routed the call through there." Michael leaned back slightly. "My office building." Jason nodded again. "Which means either coincidence," Michael finished the thought, "or someone close." The two men exchanged a look. The night had just gotten more complicated. Michael set the notepad down on Jason's desk, eyes narrowing slightly as he looked back at the routing information. "Ewing Business Center," he repeated. Jason nodded. "Restricted trunk, someone with authorized access, or someone who knows how to make it look authorized." Michael folded his arms, thinking. "My office is on the 6th floor. A few other businesses share the building, law firms, accounting offices, nothing that screams telecom infrastructure." Jason turned back to his equipment. "They wouldn't need much. A small switch, private line access, maybe a leased trunk. Could be hidden inside a server room, or even a closet." Michael gave a small smirk. Wouldn't be the first time someone hid something inside an office building. Jason grabbed his jacket again. Only one way to find out. 15 minutes later, the Countach rolled quietly into the parking lot of Ewing Business Center. The building sat mostly dark, only a few scattered lights glowing behind tinted windows. Palm trees swayed slightly in the late-night breeze, and the quiet street made the place feel more isolated than it did during the day. Michael killed the engine. "You notice anything earlier?" Jason asked. Michael nodded slightly. "Yeah, sedan followed me for a few blocks. Lost him near the coast." Jason frowned. "Same car parked near my building." Michael glanced toward the dark office tower. "Then whoever this is, they're nervous." They stepped out of the car. The front entrance was locked. Michael walked toward the side of the building. "I've got a key for the tenant entrance." He unlocked the door and the two stepped inside. The hallway lights were dim, night mode lighting for cleaning crews and security patrols. The building felt quiet, too quiet. Jason listened carefully. Nothing but the faint hum of air conditioning. They took the stairs instead of the elevator. Less noise, less attention. By the time they reached the 6th floor, Michael slowed and eased the stairwell door open. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with dark office suites. Michael pointed quietly. "My office is down there." Jason nodded, scanning the corridor. Then he noticed something. A faint glow under one of the doors farther down the hall. Jason tilted his head slightly. "That yours?" Michael shook his head. "No, that's accounting. They close at 5. They moved quietly down the hallway. The light grew brighter as they approached. Jason heard it next. A faint hum. Electronics. Michael reached the door and gently tested the handle. Unlocked. He slowly pushed it open. Inside, the office had been rearranged. Desks pushed aside, cables running across the floor, equipment racks set up near the far wall, telecom gear. Jason stepped inside, eyes immediately scanning the setup. "That's not small time," he whispered. Multiple switching units, signal routing boards, recording equipment. Jason moved closer to one of the racks. Indicator lights blinked steadily. Active. Michael spotted something else, a clipboard sitting on a nearby desk. He picked it up. Names, phone numbers. Michael's name was on the list. So was Jason's. Michael's jaw tightened. "They're not just watching us," he said quietly. Jason nodded. "They're monitoring multiple targets." Jason moved to another rack and checked the routing panel. "These lines, they're piggybacking on commercial trunks. Hard to detect unless you know exactly where to look." Michael set the clipboard down. "Question is, who's running it?" Before Jason could answer, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Both men froze. Jason looked toward the door. The footsteps were getting closer. Michael quietly reached toward the light switch. Jason shook his head. Too late. The footsteps stopped outside. The door handle moved. Michael and Jason exchanged a quick glance. Then the door opened. A man stepped inside, the same man Jason had seen in the alley. He stopped immediately when he saw them. Everyone froze for half a second. Then the man turned and ran. "Go!" Michael said. They moved fast. Michael reached the hallway first, Jason right behind him. The man sprinted toward the stairwell. Michael gave chase. Jason followed. The stairwell door slammed open. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Michael took them two at a time. By the time they reached the ground floor, the exit door was already swinging shut. They burst outside. The man ran across the parking lot toward a dark sedan, engine already running. Michael sprinted forward. The sedan peeled out just as they reached the curb. Tires squealed. The car shot into the street and disappeared into the night. Jason caught his breath slightly. "That's our guy." Michael nodded, watching the empty street. "Yeah." Jason glanced back toward the building. "They'll clear that setup now." Michael turned toward the Countach. "Then we just made this official." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Official?" Michael gave a small, confident smile. "Someone's watching us." He opened the car door. "Which means it's time we start watching them." Michael and Jason returned to the 6th floor, moving quickly but cautiously. The accounting office door still hung open. Inside, the equipment racks continued humming quietly. "They haven't pulled out yet," Jason said. Michael nodded. "Either they didn't expect us, or they don't have time." Jason moved straight to the main rack and began scanning the controls. He flipped open a panel and exposed a row of tape drives and recording modules. "These are logging calls," Jason said. "Multiple lines." Michael leaned over his shoulder. "Can you tell who they're monitoring?" Jason pressed a few buttons. The small monochrome display flickered, then populated with routing identifiers. Jason's expression shifted. "Oh, that's interesting." "What?" Michael asked. Jason stepped aside and pointed. Michael read the list. Several businesses, a law firm, a shipping company, a marina office, then Layton Investigations. Michael frowned. Not subtle. Jason kept scrolling. More names appeared. Some Michael didn't recognize. Some he did. Local business owners, a bail bondsman near the courthouse, even Carl's nightclub. Jason exhaled slowly. "They're monitoring half your network." Michael folded his arms, thinking, "This isn't random surveillance." Jason shook his head. "No, this is targeted." Michael glanced around the room again. "So whoever this is, They're trying to stay ahead of us. Jason pointed toward the recording deck. And they've been doing it for a while. Jason pressed eject. One of the small data cartridges slid out. He picked it up and slipped it into his jacket. Michael raised an eyebrow. Souvenir? Jason gave a small smirk. Evidence. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed down the hallway, a door closing somewhere else in the building. Jason looked toward the doorway. They might have someone else here. Michael nodded. Then we're done. They moved quickly back toward the stairwell and down to the parking lot. The night air felt cooler now, the tension lingering as they reached the Countach. Jason glanced around once more. No sedan, no movement. Whoever they were dealing with had already backed off. For now. Michael started the engine. So what's your read? He asked. Jason leaned back in the seat. Professional, organized, and careful. Michael nodded. And they knew enough to warn us. Jason looked out the window as they pulled away. Which means they're worried. Michael smirked slightly. Good. They drove in silence for a few minutes before Michael turned toward Jason's neighborhood. When they pulled up outside the apartment building, the Korean restaurant was still open, though quieter now. Only one customer sat at the counter. Jason opened the door. Michael followed. The owner looked up and nodded in greeting. Jason slid onto a stool. Beef noodles, he said. The owner nodded and moved to the kitchen. Michael sat beside him. You always eat after chasing suspects? Jason shrugged. Better than chasing suspects hungry. Michael smiled slightly. You find anything else on that cartridge? Jason tapped his jacket. I will. The owner placed the steaming bowl in front of Jason. Jason picked up the chopsticks, then paused. You know, Michael looked at him. If they're monitoring Carl too, we should probably warn him. Michael nodded. Tomorrow. Jason took a bite of noodles. Michael leaned back slightly, watching the quiet restaurant. Neon light flickered softly through the window. You realize, Michael said, this probably isn't over. Jason swallowed and nodded. No, it isn't. He set the chopsticks down briefly. They were watching before the yacht case. Michael frowned slightly. Which means... Jason finished the thought. This started before we even noticed. Michael gave a small, thoughtful nod. Outside, Neon City remained quiet. But somewhere in the distance, the game had already begun. And now, both sides knew the other was playing. Neon City never stayed quiet for long. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, waiting, planning their next move. And now, we were watching back. If you enjoyed tonight's episode of 80s PI Action Stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next case. Because in Neon City, there's always another story. And we're just getting started.